You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
See, when we do live Back Home Network shows and I'm hosting, I play the CrimsonCast theme.
I would have gone with any one of the three. I'm okay with that. Heck, we could use anybody's, actually.
You know what we need, Bob, is remember back in the 90s, they'd have that super hits of the Stars CDs that they would sell. We need one of those for the Back Home Network because I think we have an array of certified bangers, as the kids say. Actually, they don't say that anymore. That was the previous generation. Regardless, yes, we're happy to be joining you folks. We had a recent signing with IU basketball. We've had a lot of movement with IU football. So we decided, hey, let's talk to the people live. Let's take questions. Let's discuss where things are going. And let's get some scouting on what we've seen. So we've got Bob Moats from X's and Joe's. Bob, thanks for joining us in the middle of the afternoon. And hopefully the weather holds off long enough for us to get this in, right?
You're going to know first. I'll know second, based on where we are.
We're the advanced scouting party of the severe weather in Bloomington and the southern Indiana area here. We'll have Ryan Phillips from Assembly Call joining us here shortly. We should also have Taylor Lehman from Bite-Sized Bison coming in about 10, 15 minutes. Going to talk some IU football recruiting, as there was a bunch of really exciting news going on there and some names percolating that we might want to talk about as well. I am, of course, Galen Clavio from CrimsonCast. We appreciate you folks joining us today. If you have questions, go to YouTube and please feel free to leave some comments, questions, whatever. We love to try to get those on the show as we talk about what is going on with both of these teams. First of all, just a quick reminder, we are brought to you by Home Field Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, the softest fabrics, the coolest designs, some really cool physical media stuff coming up from Home Field Apparel, which I am not at liberty to divulge, but they will be making some announcements relatively soon. So I'm excited for you all to hear about that. But they've got great array of content on the apparel front coming out here very shortly, and some of it's already come out. They've been doing this summer series where they've been releasing new hats for a variety of teams that are out there. Obviously, great shirt collections across the board. They've been making some great combo Pacers and Indy 500 apparel, which has only been available up at the Gainbridge team store, but you can go to Home Field Apparel, use the code HOME23, get 15% off your first order, take advantage of the entire catalog. So please go do that, folks. We would love to have you let them know that we sent you to them. So again, Home Field Apparel, be sure to follow them on socials as well. Also, quick reminder, we are on YouTube. We're doing this live on YouTube, and we are increasing our YouTube audience-focused content items. We've got some exciting things coming up later on this summer that we'll be announcing, but you can subscribe to YouTube for free. Just go and search Back Home Network on YouTube and you can join us there. And we are ready to get started as we're going to let Ryan in if he knocks properly as we start this podcast out, but we're going to talk Joe and I, or Bob and I. No, are you X or Joe? Did we ever figure out which one that was?
I think I'm actually X. Mike is Joe, and you're Crimson.
I'm Crimson.
Scott is Cast.
Yes.
We finally figured out who we are. So
I've been confused about it, but there's a lot of positive momentum in general, as Noah points out. With the positive football recruiting, it's carried the good vibes from last season all the way until next, and that's true on football. And Bob, I'll say I feel like generally the vibes have gotten pretty positive with basketball. Before we dive into the new commit, we've been seeing videos coming out from these early practices. We're not seeing a ton of actual, like, what drills are they doing or whatnot, but it's been nice seeing these new players, with the practice jerseys on, hearing them talk a little bit. There was a nice tweet earlier from Hoosier basketball camps with a couple of the players involved there. We got a weightlifting video and a kind of conditioning video earlier. It's only June, but I feel like we're starting to get a little bit of a vibe around basketball a lot earlier than we've gotten it the last few years.
I'd agree with that. I mean, it's always good to just see and even though they're like 90-second or 2-minute clips as to what's going on in a practice. And obviously they're going to use the ones where the shots go in. It's not going to be the kid that's losing his mind because he's on he's on the opposite heater and stuff is just not working for him. But it's good to see kind of I would just say, just from an observation standpoint, attention to detail, what they're working on. They're talking a little, you're hearing some some chatter about, okay, this is the read you need to make in this situation. This is how you need to be going on your attack to the lane. You're getting a vibe of a culture that's very much, it's intense, but it's supportive. And it's good for the recruits, for people that are looking to recruit, to see that and to be like, okay, so this, it just kind of adds to the brand. And I mean, the one thing IU athletics has done an incredible job of, I would say, over the last decade, is the social media element. That they've done a really good job of kind of putting the program out in that way. But it's just great to see this content, and great to see just kind of the overall demeanor of this staff and how they handle situations.
Even that first practice video, it was, we want to be, and this, we heard this from Darian DeVries at Huber's.
Yeah.
We want to be the hardest working team that people have seen. I mean, that has been a really consistent message across the board as we bring Ryan Phillips in to the podcast as well. Ryan, we'll let your video stabilize here. You're a little fuzzy, but it's good to have you on the show.
Just, trying to figure this out on the fly, guys. What's up? Yeah, quite a surprise thing that happened yesterday. Yeah. But I think that when you look at what Darian DeVries' priorities have been this offseason, it's pretty clear he wants to continue to add shooting, and this is a guy with a really great shot. I don't know how that's going to translate from what he did to now, but you can just tell he's got a really good shot, and probably feels more like a developmental prospect with a couple years of eligibility that can sort of sit there and probably won't be a primary guy this year, but maybe you get a chance to develop.
Yeah, let's talk a little about, we hadn't actually even named him yet. We were talking a little bit about the introductory videos we've been seeing on social media, even before we get to this new commit. Aleksa Ristic, I believe is how you pronounce it. I
figured you guys had already said that, so I apologize for swinging.
Okay, it's great foreshadowing for the reveal of the name. I believe it's Ristic. I would normally be referring to our in-house Serbian expert, Stefan Krajnik, gives me all the pronunciations on these, but he's in Italy right now, ironically. So we're just going to go with Ristic as the pronunciation. But this was announced yesterday that he had committed, and 6'4", 200 pounds, playing for a professional team right now in Serbia, which to some degree highlights what changes we are currently seeing in the college basketball landscape, but that's kind of a separate conversation. 13.9 points, 4.3 assists, 3.3 rebounds per game, shot 51% from the field, basically 40% from three, 86% from the free throw line. Those are all numbers that we really like to see. Both of you got a chance to kind of dive into his film, at least what is out there right now. Bob, let me start with you and then go to Ryan. I want to get both your impressions on what we might expect out of this type of player, what he can do good right now or well right now, and how he might fit into what you think Darian DeVries' system is going to be. Bob, go ahead.
So what we have here, and Ryan hit the nail on the head. His biggest weapon in his arsenal is his ability to shoot the ball from the perimeter. Not just kind of a spot up knockdown shooter, but he can also get his own shot. Very effective in ball screen situations. And I would just kind of say this, we look at kids when they're taking a ball screen, like sometimes what they'll do is, and we see a lot with American or players who came up in the American system, where they take a ball screen and they're looking just to get downhill fast. He's the sort of player that's going to stretch out the ball screen, let the big either roll or pop, and he's going to create space. And if they give him enough daylight, he's going to drill it from beyond the arc. And if they do run him off the line, then he gets it to the lane. And even though probably his biggest weakness is he's not the best finisher and just looking at what I saw, limited sample size too in some of the analytics sites, but he's more of a distributor first and scorer interior second. So he's going to, in a situation where he's attacking a big, he's going to find that roll man. If the help comes over and tags the big or stops him, he's going to find the guy on the perimeter for that level 3 hit. So there we go. It's going to be, he's the sort of player that, you can, that has a lot in that skill set and will hit, can hit shots when you need him to, but also is a really good distributor, which is, again, we go back to that central casting or Darian DeVries, shooters who can distribute.
I feel like I've been inspired to some degree by watching the Indiana Pacers have a very similar style with how they use not just their guards, but essentially their whole roster. But, Ryan, as you watched his video and got a sense of what he can do, I mean, you gave a little bit of a preview of this, but where are your thoughts at in terms of what Bob said and just kind of your general overall impressions?
Well, the first thing I thought of is just, he's Serbian. He plays for the Serbian national team. Serbia is producing a lot of good NBA players right now and playing at a very high level. And honestly, they have for a while. I mean, who can forget the proverbial salad days of Marko Jaric and Vladimir Radmanovic? But, Nikola Jokic, probably the best player in the world right now, is Serbian. That Serbian national team almost took down Team USA in the Olympics, I think, and probably should have, quite frankly. But so it's not like he has not been playing in against good competition, a good system growing up. Obviously, it's not the NBA that he's playing in a professional league right now. But I think that you're going to start seeing guys like that who aren't going to be first-round NBA draft picks starting to do this pattern of going to college and maybe making a name for themselves. And so that's the first thing I want to say is this guy's probably played against some pretty good competition. So he's not coming in as a babe in the woods. He's played some good competition and he's a starter on the U20 national team. But yeah, what I see from him is he's a ball handler on the perimeter. It doesn't look like he's a finisher at the rim yet. He in some of the videos you see, some of the highlights you see, he does finish at the rim, but it doesn't look very strong. It doesn't. That's the area of his game he needs to grow on. What really impressed me was the ability to create separation for pull-up threes on the perimeter with his ball handling. Bob's right. Taking screens, being able to find openings and to distribute. And you see in a lot of these, he's hunting a spot to find openings on the perimeter for a spot up shot too. Yeah. So he understands the mechanics of finding these things. This isn't a guy who's just super talented, needs to learn how to play basketball. He's got a pretty decent feel for it. The difference is going to be, and he's got good size at 6'4" too. I mean, I think that's worth saying. It's going to be adjusting to the American style game, adjusting to the Big Ten, things like that are going to take time for him. And when you look at what Indiana has right now on the roster, they have a bunch of older veteran guys who have succeeded in college basketball. This guy's going to take a back seat to that, but he's also going to need to go up against them every day in practice.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because getting prepped for the Big Ten, obviously there's a physical delta you have to overcome there. But on the flip side, it appears clear to me, Bob, that Darian DeVries' conceptualization of how they're going to approach the style of play and what he thinks will work in the Big Ten is different than the kind of according to Hoyle approach to Big Ten play that we've seen used by Purdue and Michigan State primarily over the course of the last decade. It's a lot more free-flowing, it appears like, under DeVries. It's a lot more perimeter-oriented, and it's going to be obviously an adaptation, but this player feels like he would have been a nice plug and play for like Michigan under John Beilein, which has always to me felt like the direction that Indiana may end up heading under DeVries.
I think that's a good observation, and I think it's dead on the money, which is if you want to have a nationally relevant, a nationally contending program, you have to not look like Wisconsin 10 years ago. But you need to look like more like an SEC or an SEC school currently,
right?
And I think that you're getting these types of players where you have multi-skilled guys multiple guys who can get to the lane. If we go to the post 1 in 20 times, I'll be shocked this season more than that, because this is just going to be a team that's going to be playing a lot of 5-out, using a lot of actions to just get the ball downhill. And forcing defenses especially on the weak side, the help side, to make help, to be in help dilemmas, they may have to make a commitment. And this is another player, that this kid's going to be that type of player. And like Ryan says, we may not see a whole lot of him this year with what they have on the roster, but moving forward, and heck, if you have two guys who are alternate, let's say you have a downhill attacker that they get in recruitment next year, kind of what Conaway's going to bring to the table this year, who's maybe not a strong perimeter shooter, but definitely one who can get to the lane quick. And you have another one that can more stretch it out. That gives you diversity in how, and how teams have to defend you in 2-man game. And a lot of time it's not just, how many sets are you running or what type of patterns you're doing, but it's forcing defenses to have to think more and have to, think versus react. And if you have a diversity of players who can get who can take a ball screen differently and kill you in different ways, that's going to be a huge advantage for you rolling in.
Ryan, before we move on, I want to bring Taylor Lehman in to talk some football stuff with us, but anything else on this or stylistically that you think is worth noting at this point?
Well, I just think if you look at the types of players Darian DeVries has brought in, you're starting to, he has a type. It's guys who can shoot the ball, who can move the ball, who can, not a lot of standing still, none of that. It's a lot of movement and a lot of, ball movement with passing and with dribbling, shifting the looks you're giving the defense, as well as the ability to spread the floor and shoot. I think that it's just pretty much taking what we've seen the last 8 years at Indiana and flipping it completely on its head and relying on that movement and quickness to create offense, as opposed to putting you in specific spots and just waiting for the ball. So you look at the players he has added, and they all fit a very specific type of player. Now, I think that everybody would feel more comfortable if there was a little more of an interior presence at some point, maybe somebody who can play inside and out, but some size at the back to help, given the league he's in. But I think that we're already seeing where this is going to go and what the message he's trying to send to future players about this is what we're going to do. And it's pretty clear to see the line of what's going to happen by the guys he's added.
System is important. Recruiting to system is important. And speaking of that, let's bring in Taylor Lehman from Bison to talk a little IU football recruiting, because normally this time of year, we're not getting a lot of news about either program bringing in new players. And yet here we had a week where we got a bunch of both. Taylor, first of all, great to see you. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Let's dive right into the football situation. So a spate of recruit commits coming, what feels like after that last weekend where they had a bunch of recruits in. And I know they've got I think one more coming up here. Is it this weekend or next weekend?
This weekend.
This weekend. But we get a variety of commits coming in from a variety of different places. There's like 7 of the names here that have recently added, and now a total of, what are we up to, 17 commits for the 2026 class. Who has caught your eye out of this most recent batch that you think that IU fans should know about?
I will say I really like, it's interesting because there were a couple from Indiana that I thought were interesting in CJ Cyphers and Parker Elmore. Parker Elmore was like a really solid basketball player, and he was hurt, and he was hurt his sophomore year. He had to sit his junior year, and that kills a high school recruitment. You just don't get evaluated, and so you're not on the scene. But he has insane talent, just athleticism that I think is going to translate at the tight end position. So I'm pretty excited about him. I think IU fans should be too.
Hold on, Bob's got a local interest with this.
Oh yeah,
because Bob is located in Columbus. Any on the ground thoughts about Parker Elmore, Bob?
I know, great kid, and Taylor hit the nail on the head. The injury struggles were big. Came in from Jennings County, which is, if you're not familiar with Indiana County, over from here. Moved into the Columbus North into the district, and just again 6'5", right, Taylor? I mean, he's a big kid, and I know there are a couple guys that that work close to where I live who are very excited about getting him on a football field and some hardwood going in next season.
Ryan, did you ever cover anything at Jennings County while you were over in that area?
Oh yeah, quite a drive from Bloomington. Pretty, but I remember one time I was actually driving home late, covering Seymour versus Jennings County in basketball, and it went to 3 overtimes, and then I had to drive all the way back to Bloomington, and I got pulled over. Just a tribute to you, Galen.
Thank you.
And I was going 5 miles.
Doing that corner on the Back Home Network.
Yeah,
now.
I was pulled over for going not too much over the limit, and the guy, the cop asked me, "Do you know how fast? Do you know what the speed limit is?" I was like, "I have no idea. I've crossed like 5 county lines. I have no idea what the speed limit is." And he laughed, and he was just like, "Just slow down. There's deer." And I was like, "All right, thank you. I appreciate it." It had been a long night. I was kind of done at that point. But I covered football there, a couple times, and I covered basketball there.
That's awesome. But no, Taylor, Elmore, an interesting one. And who else really stuck out to you in this mix of recruits?
Yeah, I mean, Kevontae Hugan is a big one, just with the type of versatility that he brings as an edge rusher, but also somebody who can kind of fall into maybe like a four tech. And they pulled him from Louisville, which is the second class in a row they've pulled a defensive end from Louisville, which is getting into like Mark Hagan territory. He's a defensive line coach at Louisville now. And obviously, IU fans know the history that he has with this program as a player and then as an assistant later on. But he's a really effective recruiter, and he's been somewhat of a menace for Indiana and on the recruiting trail, especially when he was with Purdue, but also when he was in Texas and he was recruiting the state as well there. So I think he's going to be an interesting one. But then there are some others, too, that, I mean, I really like Cortez Rupert, the wide receiver out of St. Louis. Wide receivers out of St. Louis have a really good reputation. And so getting a wide receiver from that area, it carries a bit more weight than just ratings show, but also his film shows a lot of athleticism. But I really like the addition of Jaden Williams. And I wrote about this a lot in he's a linebacker out of Massillon, Ohio. And I wrote about this a lot in the Bite-Sized Bison chat, which was about it's more than just him as a prospect and actually about the perception of IU football as a program, because I worked pretty closely with that program when I was covering Ohio State recruiting, and I watched the way that they handle business when it came to recruiting. And you really needed to develop relationships with those coaches in that program and that community. I think Bryant Haynes has been doing a really good job of doing that in Ohio and specifically, but it's really insular. And so, having a program like that trust IU with one of their top players for this class and on their team at the moment, it says a lot about the program in terms of growth and the networks that it's entering. So I thought that was really promising, even though I don't know if he's the most promising linebacker in this class. I think that's Henry Olinger, also from Ohio. But just the like I said, just what it showed about the program and the coaches.
Well, and Ryan, I wanted to bring you in on this, and Bob as well, because I feel like we're seeing with both programs, football and men's basketball, a change in the perception of the programs on the part of high school coaches and not AAU ball, but you know what I mean, like non-scholastic programs. You look at the offers that IU currently has out on the basketball front. And man, they're going after like some top level players. They're in the mix in these recruiting battles with a lot of top teams across the country. We're seeing the same thing with Indiana football. But Ryan, I guess first on the basketball front, like, do you notice this like sea change that appears to be happening, at least in like where IU basketball is trying to mix it up in recruiting?
Yeah, it feels very targeted towards top level players, but that fit the system, that move. Yeah. Whereas I feel like the previous regime was just spray offers to the top people and then we'll figure it out. Get the talent, we'll figure it out. But this feels more targeted. But I also think that Indiana has shown the money is there. And so they're going to get the attention of a higher level of recruit if you have proven that you're willing to spend the money. And I don't think that money is the only thing drawing people. I would never say that. But I do think that like there are tiers where these players belong in that financial level, and Indiana is willing to play at a higher level than I think was perceived for a long time. And so, I think that there is a change in sort of leveling up there. And, a lot of that comes with success, the football program success. You're going to start to get a higher level of recruit, because people see the vision, see what has happened on the field and get excited about it. And B, you're going to get more investment in the program the better you do. And on the basketball side, new coach always creates new buzz, creates new investment. And then also, you've seen for a long time how basketball Indiana is willing to pay.
Mm-hmm. True. Although, I mean, it is interesting, though, Bob, like, there was initial buzz like when Archie Miller came in. But I feel like outside of the Langford recruitment and maybe one other guy, what it yielded was at a lower level. Now, obviously, we have to kind of wait and see how all of this plays out. Yes.
Part of that was personality, though. Part of that was the personality.
Yeah. But I guess my point is that feels like it's part of the package. And I mean, sure. I like Darian DeVries. I think he's a very plain-spoken guy, which actually speaks well to the IU fan base diaspora. He's like, I think to a lot of IU fans, I noticed this at Huber's. He sounds like the fans do. Like, he doesn't sound like he's coming at you from a completely different perspective. But there's something about the message that IU basketball has out there that seems to be resonating, Bob, with recruits in a way that the previous couple of regimes weren't resonating, even beyond the personality aspects.
I think the big thing here is that you got a guy that can actually go in and level with. Ryan hit the nail on the head. The personality is a big part of it. Is he relatable? Can he get his message across to young kids and their families? And again, in a recruitment, you're not just recruiting the kid; you're recruiting the whole family, and you're doing a very intricate in-home sales versus some of the highest competition in the country. He can articulate his vision clearly. I go back to another thing, though, that we've talked about a couple times, on air. The level of information that we're getting is different. It doesn't feel like everybody's living and dying with these. Like the one yesterday almost kind of hit us all out of left field. Yeah. Like, this is like bonus money. This is like, this is like gravy. This is like, a surprise ice cream sundae at the end of your birthday dinner. And this was one that, I think that what we're seeing here is we're seeing a very, I would call it methodical, and a very it's a very down to earth approach to this. That's not everyone trying to pick up the phone and call all the recruiting experts and saying, well, we're in it to win it. It's more like, we're just doing the work. We're going to get it done. They're landing visits, and again, Mike Weemuth, my pod partner, is great about explaining this. That you look at your funnel, your offers, to your visits, to your commitments, and as long as you're hitting the right percentages, and right now they seem to be on 2 of those 3 hitting the right percentages. And I would say, Taylor, you probably agree with me. The same thing's true of football, and they're getting into programs. Elmore's huge. You have to get a kid from Center Grove. You're getting the top programs in the state now, paying very close attention to what's happening in Bloomington. There seems to be a very business-like attitude inside Assembly Hall and Memorial Stadium right now.
Yeah, there's something with football too that kind of signals this, like, just numbers-wise. They started building their recruiting class a lot earlier. They started earning commitments and accepting commitments much earlier than they had. And I think I went back 15 years. And obviously the December signing period changed that in 2017. But even since then, I think the most they had by the date that I would use was June 3rd. The most they had by June 3rd was 6. And now this year they had 10. And so they were just building their recruiting class and not only building it, but also getting commitments earlier, which is another thing in itself too, like you were saying, Bob. And so, yeah, I think they're garnering interest, and then they're also approaching it from a business like perspective, like you were saying, which is managing the perception of the program, and then also just always having a backup plan too. That's something that I've noticed recently with this last weekend coming up for official visits. There are some guys who are not going to pan out that some fans were hoping would pan out, but it doesn't seem, it's not like a situation with like a Deontay Craig, like when Deontay Craig went to Iowa and Tom Allen was going after him pretty hard. There was nobody behind him for them to pick up. But this year, there's another wide receiver visiting. So, but behind the wide receiver who, maybe going to Ohio State. So right. It's interesting that they always have a plan and then a backup plan, and that hasn't always been the case for the football program.
2 quick questions, one for Ryan, one for Taylor. Ryan, this likely, almost certainly means one of the 2 waivers that was on the books is not working out on the basketball front. Obviously, Luke Goody and Anthony Leal. Whatever your feelings are about those individual players, I'm not opposed to like turning the page completely, just because I think it's going to be interesting watching either of those players or both of them try to integrate into an entirely brand new roster and an entirely brand new setup. But it does feel like, and we've seen this kind of intimated from various comments, that like at least one of those looks like it's off the table at this point because there's no more scholarship available.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. And I would imagine, given the cases they've had, I'd imagine it's Anthony Leal. That's not breaking news or anything. That's just been the feeling around the program that Anthony Leal had a much more tenuous case to get it approved. Neither one felt great, but Anthony Leal's felt like it didn't, it likely was not going to be accepted.
I will say I've got my small amount of reporting there is nothing's been officially announced on either one, but I think you're right. The sentiment seems to be around that. And look, we said for a while, like, they need to move forward with whatever the roster is, period. And so this is the time you kind of got to do that. I'll always be fascinated by what was the chain that led to this player being on the radar and available, and like now we're going to do the commitment in the middle of June. Maybe we'll find that out in the Now They Tell Us piece that'll get written after the season's over. Taylor, quick question for you, because I know you got to go as well, and we're going to wrap up here shortly also, people, but 17 commits now for football in this 2026 class. What do you anticipate the total size of this being, and how much are they keeping for later in the cycle?
Yeah, I think they're going to try to have most of it done by the season, which means that, this weekend here is probably the last big visits weekend. I think, of course, that after the season, there's of course, some recruiting effort in there too. But we're starting to see that it goes more towards the transfer portal once you get to the January, February months of the calendar. So I think it'll end up being, I don't know exact numbers, but I do think it's going to be pretty high. I think it's going to be, get close to the 25 mark. They brought in 23 last year, and they have, by my count, they have 5 open scholarships still. So that means they can still work the portal after the season's over. They're going to lose, I think it was 25 seniors and the COVID guys. This is the last year for the COVID scholarships. And so,
and as you and I have talked about, there's basically no sophomore class. It's 6 guys classified as sophomores right now on the roster.
Yeah, there's a huge chasm between the older guys that they brought in through the portal and then the younger guys that they brought in through high school. And I think they're just going to try to keep filling those gaps then to salvage rosters each season until those high school guys end up getting older. And then I think you're going to see year by year, they're going to rely on the portal less and less. So, yeah. And so I think it's getting close to the 25 mark. And I think there's still, and I will say also, people ask about needs for the high school class. I think there are some needs, of course, but I also think that it's more like a talent accumulation thing. This is their first real full recruiting cycle where they can take a full swing at the 2026 recruiting cycle. And so I think they're going to take as many guys as they like, and that, they'll figure out the numbers later. Yeah. And I think that's what gets them to that higher number.
And if you guys need to jump off, you're more than welcome to. We had a question from SKL Practice. Ryan's going to jump off. Ryan, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Ryan, checking in from the West Coast in the middle of the workday. We appreciate it. But SKL asked, practice begun and the NCAA no word on Goody. The NCAA is a joke. Why do you think the NCAA is dragging their feet? I don't know if the NCAA is necessarily to blame here, because I believe there's some legal wrangling going on behind the scenes on all of these waivers. And there's a huge backlog of waivers from across college sports. It's not just one program or one player. And Bob, I don't think I'm as big of a critic of the NCAA as anybody. That's also my corner in the Back Home Network. But I don't think people realize the sheer volume of waiver requests, especially since a lot of players are financially motivated to try to get these, given that there's money available that you might not be able to get because you might not be able to play basketball professionally beyond this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you got to realize that an 800-pound boulder and a firestorm hit the NCAA over the last few days. They're trying to figure out exactly how to now govern this, because it wasn't like they, and again, if you haven't listened to Galen's CrimsonCast on this yet, you need to. It hasn't been like they've had 2-3 generations to try to figure out contingency planning for the day that this was coming. But yeah, they've got a backlog of paperwork. It's going to take them a while and let's say they deny it, then Goody decides to go to court with it. And then at that point, by the end of the season, it is what it is. But I think he'll end up, if he wants to be in an IU uniform, they could probably figure it out. That being said, yeah, I mean, if you have a chance to make $500,000 playing basketball when you're 23, 24 years of age, and delays you from having to go to Europe, or you're not really going to be a G League type person, and you don't want to go out and start selling pharmaceuticals or whatever the kids are doing these days when they get out of college. I think at that point, you're looking at that additional opportunity after Luke Goody, after this group. I think Taylor hit on this a little bit with the COVID kids. The last of the COVIDs are leaving. And so now there will be a settling of this where there's a kind of you get 4 years, 5 with a red shirt, and the red shirt will be should be a very distinct This is what it looks like. But at this point, the NCAA, they're dragging, it's not, it's a situation where, make a decision so we can move on to the next step of this.
Yeah. I mean, and the other piece of this that we don't know the actual effects of yet, and Taylor, this kind of plays into the football conversation. What does the House settlement and the rev share and like all of those new items, which we've still not seen in practice yet, how does that affect the transfer portal? Coaches have been living in this world where they have to really over leverage themselves in the portal to try to get talent. But now, there's a provision that I was reading in the rev share stuff where like teams will have to pay for like a player's like contractual ending at another school with a transfer, which could end up making it not financially viable to go hunting in the transfer portal for a bunch of stuff, which makes the recruiting classes suddenly a lot more important once again. And that's why you see the numbers continuing to be what they are, among other reasons, obviously.
I think this is where it's really smart for programs. Well, for like Cignetti, like Cignetti has always wanted to, even though he hasn't been able to at Indiana, he's always wanted to lean on high school recruiting. He doesn't want to lean on the portal, and he said that from the beginning, but he's had to. And I think it's really smart of these programs to realize that this is kind of unsustainable. And at some point, there is going, you can't rely on an unsustainable source to find longevity as a program. And so I think that's where it's really smart for Cignetti and other programs that are attacking this to be working from the high school recruiting level the way that they are. And because I think that there's just so many questions about it that are you going to be getting the number of recruits from the portal that you've been getting in the last handful of years? Probably not, especially in the last few years. It's been kind of wild. Yeah,
it's all quicksand right now. Everything is in flux. No one really knows what's going to happen. But no, IU was always going to have to patch things over. It's almost I can't get over the perfect storm IU football has enjoyed in being able to bring that entire James Madison group over and have that be a cover. And then also being able to rely on the transfer portal in year 2 to fill so many holes in anticipation of being able to build now off of a couple of recruiting classes. Taylor, one last question for you on this, and then I've got one basketball question that I want Bob to answer, and then we're going to get out of here. But I would anticipate this recruiting class, like right now on 3, as football recruiting class at 30th. If they get up to that 20, one of the things about these recruiting class ratings is that they're largely driven by the number of recruits that you've got committed. Mm-hmm. The more, the higher. Do you see this potentially being a top 20 class nationwide, or like what do you see as the ceiling for it? And then I guess the related question, given what IU now is doing in relation to the 2027 class and all of the groundwork they've laid, what's the ceiling on what IU could do in football recruiting class ranking wise as they move forward?
Yeah, I don't want to be a downer, but I don't know if it's going to be a top 20 class. Okay. I'm already seeing somewhat of a ceiling being shaped here at the end of this, as we near the dead period, and that's totally fine. Like It's 1 year. It's 1 year of 11 wins. It takes a long time because like I think either Bob or Ryan said it earlier, which was that relationships do still matter. It's not all about money. And so Indiana has money. It doesn't have as much as some other programs, but there's also relationships and there's brand. And so those are two things that, Indiana can create the relationships. The brand thing has always been the biggest hurdle. And so I think that's going to be the biggest thing in terms of, really, I'm hesitant to use this phrase on CrimsonCast, but get over the hump.
I'll allow it this once, okay?
yeah. But I think that's gonna be the biggest. So to get a top 20 class, I think it's probably possible in 2027. I just don't know about 2026, even though this is going to be a very foundational and significant class for this program and the staff.
Yeah, it's exciting. It really is exciting. The whole thing is exciting. The energy around the program is exciting right now. It's a good place to be. Bob, last question. This one coming in from Noah. Thoughts on recent reports college basketball will likely switch to quarters over halves? Just run with that, please.
Actually, we're the last. men's college basketball is the last bastion on the planet that hasn't done this. As long as you can figure the media buy and the media timeouts out, which I think you can actually configure this now where you can actually add a commercial break per half, 1 or 2. Galen, that's more your area than it would be mine. But you already had the game kind of broken down into 4-minute segments over the course of a game. When you start thinking about the media timeouts breakout already. I just think it's a good shift. I think the biggest shift isn't going to necessarily be, that break in the middle, which you already kind of have with the media timeout. It's actually going to be going to 5 fouls each quarter. Yeah. And then a double bonus versus a 1-and-1. You see how that kind of plays out in the NBA as you're watching. Most of us who are watching the playoffs are seeing that kind of, they're out of fouls to give at the end of the quarter, that sort of thing. It's going to force teams to be much, I would say, a little better at converting from the field and not be so reliant on getting to the free throw line. I think you see that a little bit in the high school game. The high school game just moved to that recently as well, where they've gone from 7.5 to 7 to 10 to now 5 fouls, and when you get to 5th, you're shooting 2. So that's, I think, going to be the biggest impact on it's just going to be how teams utilize free throw shooting moving forward.
Yeah, it's going to make some strategic changes, certainly. But Bob, as you said, I'm all for it. College basketball has been too much of a holdout for such an important cog in the machinery of how basketball talent is supposed to develop in the U.S. To go from quarters in high school to halves in college, back to quarters at the professional game doesn't make a ton of sense. And the problem is, the people who decide these rules generally have been coaches, and coaches generally don't want change because they're very used to things happening the way that they are used to them happening. And it goes back to the larger issues with college sports in general about who's in charge. And it's helpful to have a smaller group of people who are making those decisions rather than necessarily we got to get everybody on board, which then you never get anybody on board, because that's how higher education works, as we know, Bob. So
read that somewhere.
Yeah. Anyway, we got to go. We're a little over time. Our thanks to Ryan Phillips for joining us earlier. Taylor, thank you for joining us. We'll get you back on CrimsonCast. We got some more football stuff to deep dive into, as it's been a real fun month. We'll see what else happens. But thank you for joining us. And Bob, as always, when's the next X's and Joe's coming out?
We're looking at we're trying to figure out our next 2 guests and trying to get them lined up, but we know one of them is going to have a very familiar face. We're hoping.
You don't know what you're talking about.
No, not a clue. Because we're going to be talking, but we're looking at probably trying to cut the next episode next week, if at all possible, and get that out to talk about another new addition to the IU staff, the IU athletics department, and a little bit of the student angle, and also tell a bunch of Gen Xers to get off my lawn.
There you go. That's always my operating philosophy is Gen Xers get off my lawn, despite
me being one.
Nominally being Gen Xer, yes. But
I'm firm.
That's fine. I count myself in the next generation more often than not these days. Anyway, my thanks to all you folks for watching. Taylor, Bite-Sized Bison, go subscribe to it. It's on Substack. You can also follow at ByTaylorL on X. X's and Joe's you can find on the Back Home Network YouTube channel and elsewhere, including Spotify. And, of course, Ryan, you can catch regularly on Assembly Call and other programming throughout the network. For all those folks, I'm Galen Clavio. Thanks for joining us here for this live update on IU basketball and football recruiting. We will catch you folks on the flip side. Stay never daunted. Have a good one, folks.